Calling from a 520 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes, hello. My name is Ehab. I'm calling from Tucson, Arizona.
Ehab from Tucson, Arizona. What's on your mind?
Hi. Hello, friends. Thanks so much for taking my call. I'll try to be brief in the context, but I do have a question at the end of all this. I'm a Palestinian American. I'm a leftist. I'm a progressive. I actually became a citizen 10 years ago. I lived in Palestine in the West Bank for a quarter of my life. I lived there during the peaceful times and the beginning of the second Intifada. I was actually born during the first Intifada, but that's not really relevant. Obviously, everything that's been happening in the past 4 or 5 months now has been top of mind, affected me and everybody around me. I've done everything I can. Protests. I called my representatives more than 40, 50 times. Contributed to podcasts, created content, tried just representing. I feel very hopeless, and this has affected me greatly. My question right now is about me trying to consider what I'm going to do in the upcoming election. This is probably my second or third time voting, and some members of my family the first time voting. I'm actually one of 10 people in my family members who can vote, including the youngest, who's 18 this year. I think about Biden in, the lesser of two evils kind of way. I think when I was voting for Biden, and I did vote for Biden, who I did not approve of at the time, but I just did not want Trump again. I thought about him being the lesser of two evils when it comes to things like, the right to abortion, the easing up, things on the border with immigration, student loans, pulling out of conflicts, etc. And he's come through on some of these things, and he's massively failed on other parts of this. And the idea here now, as we approach this has been discussed on your program. I've listened since the beginning of the war, and I really appreciate all the work that you've been doing to shed light on all this. But as I think about this, and I'm really, really trying to figure out the best way to reduce harm, because I'm part of many different communities, and I don't want to be part of, I don't want my vote to be a vote that is a protest vote to not vote for Biden, because I'm upset on how he's enabled this genocide in Gaza. But at the same time, I don't want Trump to come in and hurt people that are disenfranchised, that are minorities, is going to make things way worse. It's going to be way more supportive of the genocidal government and the Israeli state. So I'm really struggling. Me, my family, people in my community. Every time I called my representatives, I told them that I'm one of 10 Palestinian Americans in my family, and we're a growing community, and we are watching, and we will be voting with hope that would really, turn them and affect them. And it seems to not affect them at all. But I see a lot of people in the community that are in solidarity with Palestinians, and I've worked with many people, a lot of Jewish people who are very much anti-Zionist, and I really appreciate all that effort. But the question now, at the end of all this, and I don't mean to talk for too long, I'm happy to discuss this further, has Biden actually followed through with anything that would make him worth keeping? When it comes to all these particular accomplishments, quote unquote, that he's done, for example, pulling out of Afghanistan, as messy as that was, it's still pulling out of Afghanistan. But when it comes to whether or not he has worked to protect the right to abortion, whether or not he has worked to forgive student loans, whether or not he has worked to do all these other leftist progressive objectives that have actually actually limited harm, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. And my question for both of you and everybody else who's there is, if I do not vote for Biden, am I actually causing harm? or am I not voting him just because I am upset and angry at his complicity in the genocide of my people? Like, I care about more than just my people, but obviously they are the ones bleeding right now. But I don't want my vote to hurt the people of my community who I also care about. And this affects me greatly.
I don't know how I can say.
First off, let me just say, like, our heart goes out to you, and I don't think you're just, if you were not to vote for Biden, you're not just voting because of your personal feelings, right? I mean, I think, like, more. and I don't think you're. I don't. This is such an egregious thing that Biden is doing, and it's not. I don't think it's like I think it's outside of the scope of like a personal pet, issue thing. If you're and I don't really know how for you to make this assessment, frankly. But if you're asking me to give you a couple of things to add to the laundry list, I can give you a couple, but I don't.
Yes, please.
I'm not gonna sit here and tell you what you have to do in terms of like making this assessment. I mean, and you've probably heard me talk about the labor and the antitrust stuff, but I would say like in terms of like and I think. Obviously, like appointing KBJ to the Supreme Court, I think it's one of the best Supreme Court picks of my lifetime. Well, but certainly, the past 30 years. I would say one of the bigger things that has not been really sort of like absorbed. 3 weeks ago, I think it was, I interviewed Bill McKibben, who said to me that the biggest thing in terms of climate since Keystone XL, maybe even bigger, was the White House's decision on approving a new natural gas export facilities, which and he was prepared, I think it was actually this weekend, to go down to D.C. They were encouraging people to go to get arrested in a massive protest. But 2 weeks ago, maybe a week after McKibben was on, the Biden administration froze all those new approvals. And according to McKibben, basically was not only like the first time that a president has ever said no to in any meaningful way to the oil industry, or the biggest way that they've said no, but also like you're talking about billions upon billions of dollars of investment that will not happen. And that liquefied natural gas, you build sort of the capacity for something like that, then they're going to fill it. So that's one more for your list. I mean, and I think the only other thing I would say is at the end of the day, you're not voting for an individual. Yeah. And yes. I mean, we like to do that in the United States because of the nature of our political system is to, sort of like make the president king. And certainly I believe that more than any other factor involved in the U.S. support for Israel's genocide, in this specific instance, I believe the biggest factor is Biden in and of himself. I mean, there's no doubt there are elements within our national security state that are for it, but like Lloyd Austin, like I said, Lloyd Austin was out there giving a speech 2 months ago saying like we should pull back. Anthony Blinken was tweeting out ceasefire in the first hours, after October 7th. I mean, I think this is Joe Biden. I don't,
he has a 40-year relationship with Netanyahu, and that I feel like gets he's ideologically, I mean, in favor of Zionism.
So I want to, like, you know, and I say that not to, I mean, as a way of making it clear that I feel like he's culpable in this. And at the same time, there is of the thousands of people around him, and I think in terms of like the future of the Democratic Party, there are going to be more people in that party who are sympathetic to the idea that Palestinians are human beings than in the Republican Party. But I think that's just simply...
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so, and I do appreciate that. And the thing is, like, there is this other part of me. So yes, I've heard you say that before, and I recognize that, and that's why I'm even asking this question, as I recognize the nuance of other people in the administration. Certain roles are even filled because Biden is in power versus other when they were not filled during Trump. And I understand that, and I appreciate that. But there is this other side of me, and if you don't mind, just me to express that I want them to know that we exist. And it's not just me, like me being a Palestinian American, that I exist. The Arab community exists, the Muslim community exists, and other communities that see this injustice, that we exist and we matter and our voice is known, and that our vote is something that they should also be running after, you know, and that the tide has shifted, and I want that mark. I want that impact. So I do have this nuanced part of me, but this other part that's like, this is an opportunity to really, really push it hard. And I know that this is not something necessarily good for the long run, because I don't even want to say if, but when Trump comes back in power, because I really don't think Biden is going to survive this, from an election point of view. When Trump comes back in power, it's going to get so much worse. And so if that's an inevitability, and I do feel that sometimes if that's an inevitability, might as well make that mark. So this is I understand.
The question I will say this, though, is that I certainly understand the desire, but you're the only one who's going to know that.
Right.
The Democrats are cynical enough.
There is no.
Can we pick up the votes elsewhere?
Look,
right.
They may think they're going to get the votes elsewhere, but there's never going to be and particularly if Donald Trump wins, there's never going to be this moment where, I don't know if do you want Joe Biden to know? Because Joe Biden will not say that that's why it was. And if you want will Democratic pollsters know? Probably not. They may say in Michigan,
turnout was a bit depressed.
Turnout was a bit depressed, or there was a difference in, but that could be, it could be because he was old. It could be because of
right.
This or that. I mean, the way for the most efficient way, to the extent that there's any way for that, is things like BDS. In my mind, it's for protest. It's for organizations that you may belong to in the way that they're registering dissent. I mean, I think the withholding of a vote is a mechanism for leverage and increasing pressure, right? Like they just sent, I don't know, Samantha Power to Michigan to meet with representatives of Palestinian and I think just more broadly Muslim and Arab groups in Michigan, and that indicates at least that they realize that there's a problem. But at the end of the day, if they lose, who are the people responsible for Hillary Clinton losing? Do we know? Everybody who, honestly, do we know? Everybody has their they'll create their spin afterwards.
But we know how she reacted. I mean, that's the more important thing, I think, right? The Democratic establishment just basically
blamed the left.
Blamed Russia
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then they blame the left.
Yeah.
Right.
So Biden is not constitutionally capable of
learning the lesson,
of understanding this.
Well, neither is a Democrat. I mean, it's I guess you could argue that Biden 2020 was better on the issues from the left than Biden 2008 was. But part of that was also a function of that was a function of Sanders and Warren to some extent moving the party left on those issues, and he had to adopt those in the 2020 election to have that coalition. If there was a candidate that was out there now, sort of like championing the Palestinian people and pulling 20%, 25% in the polling, it would be a very different dynamic, I think, in terms of like the electoral pressure. But after the fact, you don't and I don't have the resources to be able to convince the conventional wisdom that he lost that election because of his support for genocide. I mean, even we have numbers of 50% of Democrats plus, consider this, a genocide. Again, it's not something that they're necessarily going to be voting on.
Yeah.
And so, I think that look, again, your dilemma is real. And I think that, but if you're asking me the narrow question of, will what you want to have happen, my answer would be no. It may fulfill some emotional need that you have that I'm not, but if you're asking me, will it teach them a lesson? My answer is no.
And the only piece I would add on to this is I think we get trapped when we think about this mainly on the individual level. So my thing is what pressure groups are sort of available for you to join? Because the National Muslim Democratic Council said we will withhold votes or support for candidates that don't support a ceasefire. Within a group, or if it's CARE or groups like that, pressure groups, I will not spend a breath criticizing any group like that who will say, yeah, we can't give Biden our endorsement over this.
Yeah.
And and that's, I think, the way to do it. And we can, because fundamentally, I don't think the election is where that's one very far away, right? Jesus. Right. And two, we have Nikki Haley on the other side saying Biden's being too restraintful.
Yes.
And who really knows what Trump does? I think anybody very definite about that being one way or the other. I think it's too hard to say. So there needs to be more organizing along this front in the meantime without the focus going too much on election day.
But let me just also add that we know that Trump has a constituency that is as pro-Israel as humanly possible, and that is the evangelical Christian base. So I agree that Trump is more of a wild card on this because he's somebody who he crowd surfs, and he would see this maybe as a liability for him because he's not ideologically committed in the way maybe Biden is as a Zionist.
But come on.
But
you can't trust Trump.
You can't trust Trump. That's literally what I'm
Right.
But if we're looking at, candidates are more than just individuals. They're also the constituencies that they represent. Trump represents the most pro-Israel constituency, arguably, in this country, and that's the evangelical Christians. So.
No, yeah. So this is very, very helpful, and I do appreciate it, Sam. This is something I definitely struggle with. And the notion or the suggestion of getting involved in these smaller communities with potentially for more impact is something that I think about all the time. Unfortunately, for somebody like me, there isn't necessarily a already existing model for a Palestinian American,
right,
to get involved in politics in the United States. And I'm giving myself excuses, don't get me wrong. I'm still exploring that. This is definitely, even before all of this, was trying to get involved in politics. I canvassed for Hillary back in the day. I really wanted to make my voice known, especially as somebody who did not have citizenship to any country. I was stateless before I became, American citizen. I'm like, well, now it's time, because I took it on. I took it on as like a responsibility that other people who look like me, who talk like me, who come from the place that I come from, do not have. And so, but this is very helpful, and I just wish that there's so much good work being done out there by people who have my identities that I follow, and I definitely praise. It's just a lot harder for somebody like me versus somebody who might be evangelical Zionist. There's already so much that they can get involved in. There's so much already laid out for them. The privilege is on their side, and this is stuff that you already know. I'm just kind of thank you for letting me air out my grievances and my frustration on air here. But it's something that I've been listening for the past few weeks and really, really just want to share with you. So I do appreciate you guys listening and being so thoughtful in your responses, but realistic at the same time, because I also need to hear what is reality, even if I'm wishing it was otherwise.
Yeah. Well,
keep in touch.
Appreciate the call, and I don't know, our hearts go out to you, and thank you for your call. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, friends. I appreciate your work. Have a good one.
You too. It's hard to tell someone like that what to do, basically, because I'm not a Palestinian American. I don't even know what that.
I mean, really, the only way I take it is if you're really getting into American presidency, you could find reasons to not vote for a lot of these guys throughout history, and you'd basically never vote. So that's not the way to approach voting. But I
almost true of every single politician that exists too. I mean, I think and certainly there are people out there who will just cycle through politicians. They're our savior. They're not. They're our traitor. They're our savior. They're our traitor. I mean, we have a tendency, because of the nature of a dual party system and not a parliamentary system in this country, to sort of imbue politicians with a certain amount of we have these almost parasocial relationships, and certainly the press also, makes it a function of these politicians are they're lone operators, and it just reinforces this sort of grand, what is it, the theory of great men type of thing.
Great
in
men,
the way that history moves. And
I mean, literally Louis Napoleon, Napoleon's nephew, Marx was talking about the exact same way, the focus on individual during national elections, and it's a really difficult pathology to break out of. And I mean, it makes sense in a world that isn't conducive to empowering people to stop a genocide, for instance.
Yeah.